Today's episode of Northern Lights is presented by North Star Law Group, your trusted partner in Minnesota's burgeoning legal cannabis industry. Whether you're just starting out or looking to expand, attorney Jen Riza and her team will help you understand the latest developments, scope out risks, and find a compliant path forward in this rapidly changing field. Visit northstarlaw.com and let North Star Law Group guide you through the legal landscape with confidence.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome. Another episode of Northern Lights. I'm your host, Tanner, joined today by John. Welcome.
Howdy.
Super excited to be back at the Dabbler Depot studio. I feel like just a week ago, we were over at the other studio over in the Payne area.
We quite literally were.
Yeah, we were rocking that live show. Thanks to everyone that tuned in, asked questions. Thanks to everyone that watched along afterwards. It was a fun time.
It was. I really enjoyed the new location, but it is, it's very comfy being back in 7th Street.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, so we last talked 419. It was a live show the day before 420. But John, how was your first legal 420 here in Minnesota?
Is my mic still on?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I pressed a button that I'm not sure what it does.
Oh, I think it's just a latch button.
Okay.
So as long as it's still plugged in.
I feel a button,
good.
my hand just...
It's a good sort of fidget as long as you don't pull.
Okay.
Yeah.
My 420 was amazing. So I worked an event this 420. It was a big parking lot event. The weather just about cooperated. Mm-hmm. And I would say my favorite part was talking to people from greater Minnesota who came down to the Twin Cities for this 420 event. And they're like, hell, we can just smoke weed in the parking lot. Like some of the older folks, they were so just, you could tell how strange it was to them, but also the genuine excitement. Like I was sampling hemp drinks, THC drinks, and they'd be like, oh my God, this is delicious. Like this is weed in it. And it's like, yes, we live in a whole new world here in Minnesota. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing the first legal, I would say this too, the table I was working at. So imagine I'm tabling like this, right? Couple young men just bought some fresh glass. One just got a new rig, one just got a new bong. They set each of them up next to me. A jar of weed, 3 different concentrates, and when someone made a purchase, these 2 young men would offer them a hit off their shit.
Incredible.
For hours, Tanner. It was amazing. It was amazing.
It truly felt like I was going into it and I was sort of, I'll be honest, a little nervous, being like, well, maybe it won't be exactly, I've been living my whole life thinking it's going to be the first legal 420. It's going to be incredible. And I was like, oh, maybe my hopes, I should keep them lower. Nah, it was incredible. Going to the Modest, I'll talk a little bit about what I did, but the Modest event at the end of the day, similarly, I saw some pretty big jars of weed, some pretty
That's
large
the one I missed.
jars of concentrate. Oh, well, so I sort of tried to do a little bit of all of it.
Yep.
So started the day at the Dabbler Depot over at their new location, caught a class with Stefan and Kat, teaching a little bit about how to grow, handed out some UFTA seeds. It was fun to see that. Ran over to Legacy, got my first stamp on the card, chatted with people there, got one of their water mallow beverages, which I think was one of the first products that we sampled on this show way back in June of last year. Now they're smaller cans.
June of last year, pre-legalization.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, incredible. So that I moved on from there, went to Surly's event, got to chat with Natasha, Natty Cakes. It was good to see her get a Natty Cakes Grannies collab. Got my other Modest sticker, and then also got some pretty good pizza. Then I feel like I went one other place.
This is when the THC started creeping into Tanner's system.
So I'll include some clips in here. I'll be honest, I had an idea of I'm going to create videos of all my day, and I made a lot of videos at the first stop. I took a couple at the second stop. I don't think I took any videos at Modest. By that point in the day, thankfully, I had someone driving me around.
All party all the time.
Yeah, it was.
Which was the original cross, and crossed it with another strain called the White OG, which then gave us Usta OG, which is a very fragrant, very loud, very high-yielding enzyme.
It's a diverse company, and they have a dream like I have a dream, and like Dr. King had a dream. And we all got dreams. And I want to thank Retrobate. They're phenomenal. Let's keep cannabis Minnesotan.
It truly felt like the first legal 420, and it was a fun time, that's for sure.
Hell yeah. At the last event I was at, I was there for 2 hours longer than I thought I would because I was like, why leave?
Yeah. No, I had to leave. I left Modest probably around like 9 p.m. It was starting to be that. Oh my God. So actually, I left earlier than 9 p.m. because at 9 p.m. I was at the Retro Bakery event listening to Jesse Ventura talk.
Yes, it was at Zen Arcade, correct?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So got to go there. You were right. The edibles really were kicking in by that point. But Opie from On Point said that he was at Modest till like 11:45 at night.
Wow,
it was a party that day. So
dang, if I knew that it went that long, I would have.
I know, right?
I could have popped up.
Shout out to Modest. Shout out to Surly. Shout out to just so many people that threw events here in Minnesota. I mean, do you want to shout out the event you were at?
Shout out Dick's Vape. Shout out Nicollet Diner. They threw an event.
Dig it.
Shout out. I'm trying to think of some others. Okay, it was a long 420.
No, absolutely.
It started 419 for us, honestly.
Well, and going back, 3-4 years ago, thinking about how 420 was something where I would go to the Capitol, and then maybe I'd have like a small sesh with friends afterwards. This 420. So different.
Saturday?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
I know. I was at Modest, ran into Steve, ran into Jen at the Ventura event, just ran into so many people throughout the day. It's just like, oh, you're partying too. It was a pretty good time.
Gosh, I honestly wish I got to Zen Arcade.
Yeah?
I really do. Because I was not on my way home. I wasn't far away, and I could have just swung in, said, hey, guys.
Well, can I tell you a story from Zen Arcade?
Please do.
All right, so our buddy Jesse Ventura, and this was told to me by a friend, so I don't want to necessarily put him on blast, but they were chatting with Jesse Ventura, and a guy came
the voice up. If you're gonna
the body voice. I don't even know if I can do it. But so someone came up to Jesse, and they were like, "Hey, man, will you sign my doll?" And in their hand, they like bought something off the internet of like a Jesse Ventura action figure. He looked right at him. He went, "It's not a doll. It's an action figure."
Amen.
And they go, "Oh, all right. Sorry, will you sign my action figure?" Fuck no.
Brother. I love that.
Sent him away. Turned him away. I was like, I'm not going to sign your doll.
He's not into signing stuff, taking pictures. I had to not corner him, but it was like on the signing day, I was like, Jesse, please, let me get a picture. He's like, he was honestly wanting to say no. He said no the first time. I did ask again, and he was like, okay, I don't usually do this. And I was like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
As long as you do it once.
Shout out to Jesse Ventura Farms, launching on 420.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So it was a pretty busy day.
I really love to see that he followed through with that.
Yeah.
I love to see that he's like in there now.
Mm-hmm. You can buy Lake Street gummies. You can buy Governor's Select chocolates. Tons of stuff.
Hell yeah.
All right. Well, should we get to the news of this week?
Yeah.
We really only had a couple of things happen throughout the week. A few things that I want to quick shout out. First one, shout out to Red Wing. So Red Wing is a city that is looking at opening a municipal dispensary. The one thing that makes them slightly different is that instead of just saying, how can we open this business? They actually met with the Prairie Island Indian community. So trying to figure out, we have these native partners near us. How can we help to really expand this and get something launched with the people that we have here to work with?
That's smart too. Do it right. You can start early, Red Wing.
Yeah, for reals.
I think they're just, I've really seen that everyone is interpreting the path towards legalization different with what we have right now. So it's cool seeing a town like Red Wing actually take the most efficient path. Yep. I think they're the first ones to do that.
Yeah, first one that I've seen. So we just wanted to shout out Red Wing. Still not a ton of news about what that would look like. More to come in the future. But, cool to see so many towns exploring how does cannabis look for us.
Dude, yeah, Minnesota cannabis is getting more interesting every day as people take their shots.
Oh, yeah. But, honestly, the biggest news from this week, it was 420, sort of things were in a lull after that, but things weren't in a lull at the legislature, at least sort of. Yeah, so let's get to it. So I've got a couple of things that I want to sort of talk about, and then we'll talk about, like the real big story this week. So House File 4757, the bill that passed in the House last week. We talked about that on our live show. It's still working its way. It now has its first hearing in the Senate. So they're no longer looking at the Senate version, but now the House version in the Senate. It'll be going to the Commerce Committee, and that's happening next Tuesday. So if you're listening to this Monday, happening tomorrow, 12:30. Exciting to see that.
I'll probably be down there.
There we go.
Ooh.
Live stream it. You can watch John talk again tomorrow if you're watching this on Monday.
I will not live stream it.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Guy who barely responds to his text here.
Live streaming. All right. So that bill we saw sort of get mulled into the Senate. Let's be honest. A lot of the real action that's been happening in the Senate this week is looking at a senator that might have been arrested for burglary.
Well, might have, yes. Charged, yes.
Not convicted. And that's why we want to be clear.
Question mark, folks.
Yeah, so we reached out to some people to try to get better insights on, do you think that this will really prevent cannabis legislation from moving forward? Really, they think no. The ethics committee does need to look at it. It's probably going to happen after the committee or after session wraps up.
Exactly. Like, it's too late. We have 3 weeks left. GOP does not have the power to make her resign. Yeah. Like, the caucus doesn't have an appetite to do it. Like, I heard Erin Murphy on NPR, and she, in so many words, said, we're going to wait till session ends, and then we're going to, she's going to have to figure her own life out because Senator Mitchell, come on. Yeah. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. But absolutely. We want to very, very carefully avoid defamation. I laugh when I'm
awkward also. When I'm uncomfortable. Because I'm laughing, but this is a serious situation.
It's a serious situation. And also, I feel very much for Mitchell and her family and just everything going on. And excited to see that at least the legislation that people have been working across the state on for a long time will continue to make its way forward, and that the balance of that isn't hanging.
Well,
for now,
yeah.
At least on this,
and it's like, even if it's like not just cannabis stuff, there's so many bills that have been worked on this year that's like it's all in flux now. Yeah, because that vote.
And I want to talk about one other bill that we actually talked about a little bit earlier in the year that really I had thought sort of died in committee, but it appears to sort of back alive. So House File 4251.
It's the flavor ban?
Yeah. So it would ban flavored added to cannabis products. And really the language that we're specifically looking at is that it would ban any product that presents any description or depiction of flavor that would imply to an ordinary person that a product might contain a flavor other than the natural taste or smell of cannabis. So like buying a vape cartridge that says blueberry muffin, even though blueberry muffin is a cultivar, probably to an ordinary person would impart flavors other than cannabis. And similarly, anything that imparts a taste or smell other than the taste or smell of cannabis that is distinguishable by an ordinary person prior to or during the consumption. So if you smell it and it smells like straight oranges, that might not be able to be sold.
I don't think I have to say it, but that's super problematic.
It's super
problematic in cannabis, where not only the names, the smells, like those are parts of of how you classify these things.
Absolutely.
Like it's the natural way they have. Well, I say natural, but they have been like bred to do this, and that's part of the appeal of this whole deal.
Yeah, when people name a cultivar after a certain smell, certain flavor, certain something, it's not necessarily because they want to be able to go put it on the shelf and say like, hey, look at this. It's something that happened in the legacy market that was, hey, this smells like cereal milk. Yes. Hey, this smells like insert OG, diesel, insert any smell here. Having limitations on people being able to accurately describe their cannabis products, I think is a little bit concerning.
So I looked at it carefully. I saw some little snippet of it was also posted on social media with some new language.
Yeah.
And it's like you'll be able to put 6-point font of whatever profile, whatever cultivar you are selling, and that is not enough. That's not correct. It's
No.
not the way we want to do this. And I'm kind of curious of how this bill resurrected itself.
Yeah, so it looks like what happened is that the joint rules around this needing to be heard in every single committee prior to that artificial deadline that they set has been waived. So they're
There
able
was
to
a
move it
deadline.
forward. Yeah, right. But it's looking like what could potentially happen is that it's going to be included in the overall health omnibus bill that the Health and Human Services Committee puts together. So if DFL legislators want to vote against it, they're not just going to have to say, hey, I don't like that one specific provision. We're voting against this one bill. It's, hey, we've got this whole omnibus bill that was worked together. If Commerce or if, like the committee that works together to put it together says this is part of the final version, how can one House member stand in the way and say, we're not going to pass Health and Human Services. We're not going to pass funding for X, Y, and Z because I don't want you to be able to describe cannabis products in certain ways.
Yeah.
I think it sort of could potentially put some people into a tricky situation.
Then the hope is it doesn't get into the bill with this language.
Absolutely.
Like the original language, fine.
Yeah.
Like, it can be interpreted however you please. And I think at that point, OCM and whoever is the regulator will understand, like, okay, this is not marketing towards, they're not saying it's blueberries, they're not saying it's a banana.
Absolutely,
They're just describing the flavors and effects. But if it stays as is, it would be something that we would have to operate under for, honestly, though, like the way this is all shaping to work out, it might not affect a single soul by next session.
Possible.
And so but the language itself is super problematic.
And that's the thing, John. Think back to the early days of activism. We can't let bad bills make their ways into bad laws.
It's a bad laws.
And obviously, we don't need to remind people to call their lawmakers. People are already doing that. I know you guys are sick of us saying, call your lawmakers, send them emails. If you got a text message for them, send them a text message, whatever be it. But hey, if you happen to be reaching out to them and saying, here are some of my concerns, tell them definitely don't include this language in any future
especially
bills.
if you are a St. Paul resident. I believe the bill comes from a St. Paul representative. Reach out to your rep.
Yeah,
Be
Representative Her.
Yeah, I don't like this. I want this language changed. Let them know why. Because if it makes it, like you said, what is it? It's 71 is the health bill. That will pass.
Yep.
Like the health bill will pass. So if you don't like this language, make sure it doesn't get in there.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of talking myself on that one too.
Yeah, nope, absolutely. Well, I think it's a good reminder that like we've been so focused on X, Y, and Z from that omnibus bill or the CannOmnibus bill, which I think is important stuff. I don't mean to minimize it.
And that's why it's strange that this one is backdooring its way in when it will affect every part of the cannabis industry that deals with the plant.
Oh yeah,
feels.
Well, and
strange.
I think that's sort of what we're going to run into over the next couple of years is if you think about it, not every alcohol bill that makes its way through session is through like a alcohol law reform lens. Sometimes it's, hey, we're protecting kids, and these are just various reforms that protect kids. Sometimes it's we're preserving Minnesotan health, and this is just various measures happen to include some alcohol things. I think this might be our first look at cannabis being included in that lens of, hey, this is just a general health reform. And yeah, it affects cannabis products, but it includes all smokables. But I don't know.
But it is focused on, the
focused on
point is to regulate
Yeah.
cannabis hard. And I really would love to hear from Rep. Her on this.
Yeah, so Rep. Her, if you want to come on the show, reach out.
Or just like where this information's coming. Like it doesn't make sense.
Nope.
Like this doesn't protect anyone, and that's the thing. It would be harmful to an industry we're trying to set up, and that's all it would be at this point.
Artificial regulations placed upon the rules that OCM are already working hard to help develop. We don't need more rules placed on top of an industry when we have a regulatory body literally making the rules right now.
Right now. I would say the bulk of this bill, because I did read it, it's like a paragraph.
Yeah.
It's like fine. It's like, we don't want artificial flavoring, but that natural flavoring, and I say natural again because like it's human controlled, but
For sure.
it's still the plant doing its own thing.
Yeah, absolutely. If they limited it to smokables can only have cannabis or herbally derived terpenes, naturally derived terpene, like whatever, I don't know. That I'm not the expert on this. I do know, however, that language, not what we want in our bill.
Not now. I was like, I need to reach out to people.
No, that's
what you need to
good.
do
Yeah,
too. Like,
you reach out
to people.
Because this is not something
You're
we
growing
should
at
see.
home right now. Reach out. Let them know.
Yeah,
why that's
I want to be
problematic.
able to describe my product to people as it is,
Yeah.
not having to say, "Hey, I'm sorry that this tastes like blueberries." I have to call it blue bum. Oh, like I don't know, whatever
Like
word to get
Blue
around.
cup,
Yeah,
blue tin,
there we go.
blue top.
Allen wrench.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, I have talked about the legislature enough today. How about we try a new cannabis product?
Yes, please.
Cool. So we had some products that we brought in. Really excited to try them. But then our buddy Liam, who was walking by when we were getting ready, was like, "Hey, we're unpacking some new products. Do you guys want to give it a try?" And we're like, "Well, of course we do."
I was way too excited.
Oh, yeah. So this is one that we actually almost talked about in the show a couple weeks ago because it just recently launched here in Minnesota. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit about the brand itself, but I'm also really just excited to give this a try. Meadow Cat Nap. All right, so here, I'm going to give you the can. I'm going to pull up the information about the company, and we'll sort of share the load here.
Meadow Catnap. Hey, I met a cat named Catnap the other week.
There we go. Wow.
He was not real. He was stuffed.
Wow. Oh, letdown.
Yeah.
All right, so you had me going. You said he's not real, and I was like, "John, I'm concerned about you." And you're like, "It's stuffed." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's a stuffed animal." Okay.
It's what is she? My second cousin.
Okay. All right.
But she treats it like it's alive.
I love that.
Yeah.
So Dana Thompson used to work for Owamni, a really well-known restaurant here in town focusing
would
on
say-
Dakota infused food.
Probably the most globally known restaurant that resides in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Michelin star winning chef or James
Beard.
Beard?
Yeah,
Beard.
Beard.
Yeah, the
Beard.
Beard award winning
They
chef.
might have a star.
Not according to Care 11.
Oh. Never mind.
Yeah, all right. James Beard Award for Best New Restaurant in 2022, and now we get to try the cannabis product. So all of the flavors come from Minnesota, and some of the flavors that we're going to be using today are traditional herbal medicines and Dakota culture, but also some really cool flavors.
Yeah, this is bound to be an interesting one. It's on the low end of the low dose.
Oh, yeah.
Which we all love.
3 milligrams, I believe.
3 and 5. So it is still a 1-to-1 in that way because it's still using both. And let me read this. Heti. Am I pronouncing that right?
I believe so.
Heti Meadow Cat Nap. The feeling of being secure, held by the earth. Lying in honeyed clover, looking up at the clouds, being warmed by the sun. Light carbonation. Can be served iced or hot.
Ooh, okay.
Very interesting. Oh, man. Lying in a honeyed clover, looking up at the clouds, being warmed by the sun. Hell yeah.
All right, well, I'm definitely going to have to grab a can of these on the way out and try it hot because that sounds super interesting.
Right?
Thank you. I love it in the beautiful beer dabbler cup from the Dabbler Depot here. Salud.
Cheers.
Wow.
Oh, my God. It's
Wow, that's really good.
when you make the perfect homemade tea, like every 100 cups, you get that right mix.
Yeah. So I feel like every time on this show I say, "Oh, that sounded like something I didn't want," but it was really good. But in total honesty, I was reading off the mint, the dandelion leaf, and was thinking like, I'm not really like an herbally tea kind of guy. This is really good, though. It definitely has like that sweetness to it. It has a nice balance to the flavor. That's good.
Like I used to drink Mullen tea a lot. It'd be hard to get it to taste good, so you'd have to mix it with a bunch of stuff. And mint was one of the things I mixed it with. But like this is just so well balanced on the herbal side. Like the mint, I think the mint hits you first, but then everything else kind of follows it. And it's
Yeah. Wow, that's really good.
honestly unlike anything I've tried in the THC space. I like this.
Yeah, so they have 3 other flavors that they were unboxing that we'll have to give a try on the show a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, super neat balance to that flavor.
Celebrating the plants around us, and they just zero.
Yeah, so we can...
Only 7 grams of sugar in this guy.
Wow. So we can shout out the other flavors. They got River Path, which is blueberry and rose hip. They've got Marshland Harvest, which is cranberry, blackcurrant, and sumac. And then they have Woodland Edge, which is cedar, maple, and wild mint.
Woodland Edge. That one sounded cedar, maple, and wild mint.
Yeah.
I like that. So I got to go over the can. You got all natural, no refined sugars, gluten-free, low-cal, vegan, and antioxidants.
I like it. Wow.
Yeah. Follow them at Heti means home. Oh, now I know.
There we go. We'll put that in the show notes if you want to follow along. But wow, that's a good one. I'd recommend.
Yeah, I like.
People should get that one try.
I like tea. It's a really good tea.
Yeah.
Like yeah. It is a really good tea.
That's a good one. All right. Well, that's really all that we got in terms of news, in terms of sampling products, but not all we got for this episode. We still got a lot coming up here. So a little bit later, actually, right after the break, you're going to be hearing from Colin Kelley of Meadow Capital. Really excited to be talking to him. Actually, it was a super interesting interview, hearing about some of the early days of the medical industry here in Minnesota and some of the future for cannabis. And then a little bit later, Cooking with Clem. He's going to be coming back on, showing us how to make some pan-roasted veggies using his infused spices. They were so good. So definitely watch to the end and catch that one.
Let's go. All right.
We'll be right back.
One.
Super excited to be sitting here with Colin Kelley of Meadow Capital. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, really excited to be able to explore a little bit about your history, which goes back pretty far here in Minnesota. And then also talk a little bit about some of the projects that you're working on here, both in Minnesota, but also around the country. Really some exciting stuff. But first, take us a little bit about your background. Prior to 2015 here in Minnesota, what was some of the things that you were working on? Obviously not cannabis related, but just generally.
Sure. Yeah, that I excuse me. I always refer to those days as my pre-cannabis days. So BC, before cannabis.
I love
that. I'd worked in a lot of software startups, artificial intelligence software startups. I even tried my hand at investment banking and found out that not only was I not very good at it, but I also really didn't like it at all. It's just way too structured, and they weren't my people. I'd done some other consulting for other groups, kind of helping set up and start not only businesses, but also kind of new sectors within industries, right? So a lot of it could have been supply chain, could have been other, different things like that. So that was some of my background, right? Kind of, I knew I was a business-oriented person, so to speak. So then I had the fortune of actually I think it might have been like a cocktail party, probably one that I had no business being at, right? I mean, I didn't quite crash it, but it was
Those
close.
are the best ones to be at.
Close, yeah. And it was the summer. The law had just gotten passed for medical in Minnesota, but the applications hadn't even dropped yet. And so I happened to be at this event.
Sounds familiar.
Right, 14. 14, summer 14. So bumped into some folks who were emergency room physicians practicing, and they were kind of talking about how they were really fed up with prescribing opiates and other medications that they thought were really damaging to people's health, and felt like they didn't have a lot of other options. And so they were saying, hey, we want to apply for a license here, a medical license in Minnesota. And they said, maybe you want to help us, write a little piece of the application since you do quote unquote startups.
Okay.
Yeah. And I said, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, no big deal. Sounds great. I'll do that. Let me know. And so I helped them out a little bit. But really I didn't think anything of it. And then I got a phone call in December of 2014. And they said, well, we won.
Okay.
And then they said, we have a group, because each of the applicants, you got a lot more points if you had kind of consultants from outside the state who had been successful in, setting up a cannabis program before.
For sure.
Right. So I think Kyle Kingsley's group, Vireo, is now Goodness Growth. They had partnered maybe with a group out of Colorado or something like that. And I think the Leafline group had looked at other medical states, and Connecticut was one of the there weren't that many at that point.
For sure.
Right. And Connecticut had passed. So they found a group that had scored very well in Connecticut, scoring and had them consulting. And, but the story was, hey, we don't have any folks on the ground in Minnesota, and this could be another startup for you. What do you think?
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I've had the opportunity to look through the PowerPoint, mind you, a slightly redacted version, but that was presented to the state of, here's sort of our general proposal, our general plan on property. Right. And looking at that partnership, that was an essential part. And I think they were like the highest scoring applicant out of their state. So a good person to partner with.
Yeah. Yeah. They definitely, knew what they were doing. They had been, they had done work in Colorado and Nevada as well. Excuse me. So they were a good group and had expertise in different areas, which was very helpful for us. And,
at that point, how familiar were you with cannabis at that age?
Not very.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get this call and it's like, hey, so we got the license. We're starting up our business. What was your, clearly you said yes at some point, but what was your reaction to that?
Well, so, it actually had been, I quickly had a flashback to my mom, who's like a 5th grade teacher who taught DARE, had DARE in her classroom. She still has a DARE teddy bear in her living room.
Okay.
So I had that quick moment of thought. And then I said, well, yeah, of course. And then I called the employer that I had at the time, which was a software company. And I was like, yeah, so I quit. Yeah, that was it. It just seemed pretty exciting.
And what role did they offer you at that time?
At that time, it was Chief Operating Officer.
Wow.
And then we added Chief Financial Officer to that, which is it's a pretty challenging mixture. So we had to really build a great team of people who could fill a lot of gaps, right? Like somebody strong in compliance, a strong controller that knew accounting better, upside down and sideways, right?
Do you have any idea what the ambition of the size that they were going for, what they were allowed to go for right off the bat?
Right off the bat, it was super limited. I think it was 4 locations, maybe 5 locations, in terms of the retail fronts that they were allowed to have.
Sure.
Yeah. Today we have a slightly expanded version, but I still think it's capped at 8 per business.
Right. It was tied to congressional districts.
Yeah.
So at the time, the number one point getter could choose odd or even numbered congressional districts.
Interesting. Okay. Totally.
And so that was Vireo, and they chose whatever one had Minneapolis in it, right? And so they chose that one. And then, we had the other set of congressional districts. And so you had to put one in each of those. And it's a great way, gerrymandering aside, right? It's a great way to spread out access to medicine. Sure. It would be nice if they had said, you must put 4 in each congressional district, right? I think that was a limiting factor for the program early on was, access points to the medicine was one of the issues, but
it's just so interesting to hear 10 years later, we're talking about how many plants we can grow. And it's like different problem, but same kind of conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I do appreciate that Minnesota, they did a couple things well when they set up the program, I think. Was one, they made it kind of like a research study. So the Department of Health collected all the data, and they actually sat down with each company and went over it every quarter and looked at where are the outliers in terms of dosage, and and they gave surveys out to the patients about am I feeling better or worse, or and so I think that type of data is important to have, and it certainly goes further improving what we already know about cannabis, right? And they also didn't limit canopy or plant size, so that was great. I think the limit was financially what you could outlay, right? I mean, there was even less access to capital in 2015 than there has been in the last few years. So, you pay cash for a building, and you have to, there are also not many communities that would allow you to be there, right?
Yeah, I remember it being news when the city council approved, the grow can come in. Finally, we found the place that it's allowed.
Yeah. And so a lot of times it would push you pretty far outside the metro, which then also became an issue staffing, right? Because you want high quality, folks, and there are high quality folks all over the state of Minnesota, but we need 50 of them.
Yeah. So take us through what some of the early days of essentially this startup company was like. Was it similar to other startups that you had worked at in the past, or is cannabis its own unique beast?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what I do love, that it's still, my opinion is it's still so early. And in 2015, it was very early. And so there's a lot of creative problem solving that still gets to occur, because there's not necessarily the way.
Fair.
There are a bunch of ways.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can appreciate that, right? There are a number of different ways to grow cannabis even, right? And they all grow good quality cannabis. So wonderful. You just have to pick one.
And so go-to-market strategy, where's the war room? Where are you building before everything gets built? Yeah.
So when we did the application, usually you're in a law firm kind of office for a while, and there was the applications were so massive. Ours was 3,500 pages or something, and you needed X amount of physical copies, and we actually set the copier on fire at the law firm, and we had to pay for it later.
That's incredible. I mean, the true power of regulation.
Even the copier, even the machine, the inanimate object said, no, this is ridiculous. But we found our cultivation and manufacturing and offices were to be in Cottage Grove, kind of near, Renewal by Anderson in that area down, and so but it was an alfalfa field. When we got it, so there was a lot of site work, and then you had to build and whatnot. And we knew so what we did, we brought in a bunch of temporary buildings and put them all together. There were 8 trailers, and we put them together so they made one giant room. And then we kind of dextered the whole inside with plastic sheeting, right? And attached, an HVAC to it. Plunked a security guard down in the front, and she was never allowed to leave for 4 months. And that was the temporary grow where we did all of our starts.
Wow.
And we grew there, and we had our first harvest in there. Is the state was very, very explicit, and we were all very fearful. They gave licenses in December, and they said, you shall have a dispensary open and make your first sale on July 1st, or we'll take your license and give it to the next person in line. And that includes growing.
Can we talk about some other ridiculous things that they told you?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I definitely will. Yeah. But anyway, we had a little office, an office in St. Paul Park. That was I remember when the wind blew, the curtains moved, and it was pretty sad and sketchy. That's
so East Side.
East, yeah.
A lot of activity on the east side.
On the east side and St. Paul as well. And So we built the permanent facility, had our first harvest, and then we're able to, transition a lot of the clones and the other plants into the veg rooms and like really ready to start going. And we had the extraction room was commissioned first, so we could run the extractor before the rest of the building was commissioned.
Okay.
To actually start to get the medicine.
Because
going.
for people who don't know or maybe don't remember, you couldn't sell the raw flower at the time.
No
it
flower.
had to be in a processed form. Yeah.
Only in process form, and it had to be CO2 extraction, which at the time the yields were okay, but like it took a long time, and the size of the machines. I mean, they were like really small machines, so you could only process a few pounds at a time, right? Right. And so this became a big issue, and the state had, you had to register, and this was a big issue for I think all the medical companies for the first several years.
Yeah.
One was that you had to register a product, and so they had to approve said product, and then in order for that and then you could never run out of it. And if you ran out of it, they could shut you. They could shut you down. They could shut the dispensary down. They could shut you down for days on time. They could fine you like tens and thousands of dollars and whatnot.
Which medicinally makes sense on the principle of this is medicine. We don't want the patients to run out of their medicine.
But there wasn't a substitution. And so they also, what they defined as a product then became a challenge, right? So they said, you have to be within 3% of all the cannabinoids in everything, and which is even more precise than say like Advil and Tylenol is like 10%, right? Okay, 3%, whatever. We have scientists; they're very smart. They can figure this out, right? So, so they could get that. The issue became, when you have, let's say, a higher THC vape cartridge, right, that has a tiny little bit of CBD in it, but the CBD had to be within 3%. And when you start with, whatever, like 1%, so like the margin for error on those like tail cannabinoids was so great that it just became this huge hassle.
I'm trying to, so like hypothetically, like tangerine, like to be in a type of oil, like you always have to have the exact same, not just percentage and ratios, but like down to even the minor cannabinoids and making sure that they're all in that exact range.
Because 3% of 1% is not very much.
It's tiny and tiny, and guess what? It's a plant.
Yeah, totally.
Right? So each, like even within one harvest, a different part of the room could produce a different amount of like CBD. Yeah. Right? Never mind.
And we're picking on CBD, but you're saying all the minor cannabinoids involved in the product.
It did. And we finally got them to like not worry about those and just go with THC and CBD, but it still became a challenge. We had, the higher CBD medications too, that the ratio, the margin for error on the THC, that was usually at a 20-to-1 ratio, right? With THC being the 1, it still had, it was really hard to get it right.
Sure. And you can't run out.
And you can never run out. So then
it sounds like a twisted game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy thinking how, like, from the consumer standpoint, maybe you go to the dispensary and you're like, why are there only 6 options or whatever be it? But the reason on the business side is because every single one of those needs to always be in stock. And at any point, someone can come in and say, I want this. And you have to go, yep, it's right here. Yeah. That's insane.
It's pretty crazy. And so it did prevent us from having a larger kind of selection of products, because it's, and also we had to come up with a whole process. We developed like a proposal for testing products to say, we have a new product that we want, but again, we don't know if patients want this actual product. So what if we make it and we get it out to all these different dispensaries, and then the patients don't want it, or the patients only want it in one area, right? Like they don't want it in St. Cloud, but they do want it in Hibbing. Wow.
It almost like eliminates all traditional marketing strategy that you would want to
just poof, so that became a big challenge. So we had to work with the state on, kind of like moving some of those standards. We'd say, okay, we know what you're trying to accomplish, and we want to have a continuous supply of safe medicine that's consistent for everybody. And like, we have to be operate.
Yeah.
Like, come on now.
Going back like 6 years ago, 8 years ago, who
Yeah.
were some of those people in place? You said the Department of Health. Is that who you interfaced with?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Minnesota Department of Health, they had the cannabis
Office of
Office of
Medical
Office
Cannabis.
of OCM, the Office of Cannabis Management. And so we fortunately built good relationships with them, and we could kind of say, okay, you need a memo that revises this, or even some of the testing labs, right, that were not used to testing cannabis. And so, we had to work with them in terms of, what the testing protocol should be and how many samples do you need and
So
size. And
we've heard a lot of comments from
Yeah.
like the hemp regulators of today where, I mean, frankly, they came to a panel that we did and we're talking about regulations and went, yeah, I don't really know why these are the rules, but this is what the lawmakers passed. So here we go.
Yeah.
At the time, was there that similar sort of, I mean, frankly, transparency and like, we don't exactly know why this is the rules either, but this is what statute says. So this is how it works. Or
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
were some of those conversations like?
I think initially there was kind of like, well, this is statute and it's really new and it almost didn't pass. So, do you really want to open that up? Because this whole thing could actually get rolled back
Okay, totally.
before it, in
Yeah.
a sense. And the companies were, the companies are trying to, financially survive so we can continue to get medicine out there,
Yeah.
And so we did have some good conversations. We definitely learned kind of the hierarchy of, there's statute that the legislators, vote on, right? And that's law, and that's really hard to change. Like once a year, really hard to change, and someone can sneak other stuff in there that hurts you. Like hurts the industry, hurts patients, hurts a lot of people, right?
Right.
And then there's rule. So there's a rules committee. And then usually the regulatory body is, they're 90% of it. But they set the rules. And so that's a great way to kind of like get a conversation going and say, hey, like, can we change some of the rules? And usually they'll do that, once a year. They'll kind of start to modify the rules or tweak them to make just things work better. And they were open to those conversations. And then in the interim, there's the possibility for memo. So the regulatory body can issue a memo to all the licensees and say, hey, we're changing the standard. The rules say that the testing standard is 3%, but we're changing the testing. If something comprises less than 5% of the total, we're going to change it to 10% variance.
Okay, totally.
And then they would then hopefully make it permanent in rule, like later on that year when they did their whole thing.
Okay.
Right. But it took us a couple years of like very open and honest communication and very much, we couldn't be too industry and they couldn't be too regulator in those conversations. We really had to take those hats off and say like, hey, look, it did help that it was a medical program. And we could say, hey, we're here. It's a medical program. We're here for patients. Like, let's just keep that goal in mind and we'll figure this stuff out.
That definitely makes sense. Wow, it's cool to sort of hear about the back end side of it, because I think from the patient standpoint, we maybe only see sort of what's put in the store or maybe what the companies put out in social media or whatever be it.
Yeah.
But hearing about the sort of the restrictions on the state, I was talking to an employee of a Minnesota business. I don't want to put anyone on blast, but a current medical grower. And I was talking about like, God, I'm really a fan of solventless extracts. Like, why don't we have that? That's something I really want. She's like, well, frankly, it's the state. Like, I think we would love to be making it too, but until the Department of Health or the Office of Medical Cannabis says, yeah, patients can do this and we can do it in a consistent way, we're not going to be able to.
Right. And I think early on, and they had it in, they might have even had it in law early on. I think they were worried about, if you think about the early BHO butane days, right?
Oh yeah.
They were, oh my God, someone's gonna they're gonna blow up half of Cottage Grove.
For sure.
They're gonna, there's gonna be, kerosene in the cannabis, and like people are gonna die, and there was that type level of fear.
For sure.
Right? And so initially, I think they they put it in there, and they maybe they felt very noble that it was like a patient safety and product quality, you know, thing. And like the industry has grown so much that there are amazing products out there from, you know, so many different methods of extraction, whether it's, you know, ice water or BHO or
For
ethanol
sure.
or, you know, whatever it is. Right?
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
were
yeah.
just talking yesterday about sort of the evolution of legalization has really exposed a lot of what we can do with cannabis. That 10 years ago, we didn't, what didn't really exist. Yeah.
And from a consumer perspective, I left last night so much more clear-headed using the extracts that we were using versus some of the other methods that I've experimented with, right? And it's like,
For sure.
it is really nice to have those fine extracts available because it interacts with our body just much differently and
Right.
in a much clearer way from my experience.
But I'm trying to now picture like a solventless extract, but still needing to get within that 3% variance. I mean, that's a whole other thing. So, well, we're going to take a short break here, but when we get back, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that you're doing today, both in Minnesota and nationally.
Yeah, great.
Perfect. We'll be right back. All right, and we're back. So tell me a little bit more about from the business standpoint. You know, I can picture in my mind the newspaper or the TV news headlines when those dispensaries first opened. We had patients coming in, along with a lot of media, showing that people have access to legal cannabis medication.
Yeah.
What was it like? Like, was it? I picture in my mind like working for like a game studio and like your game finally launched and like you're all super proud of it. Was that sort of the feeling of dispensaries open, or was that really sort of when like the stress of business began? I mean, what was it like on the inside?
I mean, it was that race to July 1st to be able to open. It was a big day of celebration. I mean, we definitely, the whole company got together and we were, you know, so ecstatic. I mean, we were almost crying. All of us were so happy. You know?
From July 1st to when you started, what was that time frame?
So, I mean, we started the site work in December and then, you know, got the temporary grow in place in like January, February-ish, right? And did the starts, like got the clones going and the, you know, whatnot, and started growing. And then started constructing the actual, you know, permanent facility, which I think we commissioned the extraction room in May, which is, you know, we harvested there in like in May. So there's, you know, 3 or 4 months of like, you know, 'cause you're growing from a smaller, you know, it's not like you took healthy big clones or something, right? You're like earlier, it takes a little longer.
Sure.
So, you know, you would do the cure, we did the extraction, and then we had to, you know, go through the whole like, you know, formulation process and decarb. And I think initially our first set of products were, you know, like tinctures and like maybe some vape, you know, a couple vape. Yeah. And we're just in the three, like a couple different ratios, like a high CBD 1-to-1 and a high THC. And so that was, you know, we're kind of going through that, and we knew that. So from, you know, if you extract and you're now in like mid-May and you have 6 weeks left. So then you have, you know, you have to test this. You might have to reformulate, you know, and then, you know, if it's a tincture, you have to decarb it, and then you have to do this. And then if it's, you know, do you want to add terpenes back into the vapes that came off the first run of the CO2, which CO2 is great for that. Actually, you get some really nice actual cannabis terpenes out. So that's lovely. But, you know, so we're kind of like, okay, this is going to be kind of tight because then we have to package it all. And it's not like we have big machines to do this. Like I'm sitting there with a pipette, like trying to get very sticky, like 100%.
Oh, and this is like straight startup energy, like COO, like down there
I'm
filling
in there,
vapes.
like filling vapes, bringing in sandwiches on Sundays, and like, you know, like filling vapes, and like we, and it's so like we didn't use any excipients in the or cutting agents in the vape, so it's like really thick.
Oh yeah,
really thick oil, and like, you know, so you're like, oh my gosh, how does this, you know, and you're trying to get it right. And then it was also, you know, a time frame when, like, as an example, you clean a lot of things with ethanol, even in a CO2, you know, lab. It's like a great way to do that. However, there was an ethanol shortage nationally.
Okay.
And so,
All right.
as an example, they're like, yeah, my extraction guy calls me up on a Sunday morning, like 7. And he's like, yeah, so we need ethanol, and and I've been looking for it for weeks, all over the country, couldn't get it anywhere. Like, and I was like, well, how? Like, what? Tell me a little bit about this, like characteristics wise, percentage of alcohol, like what do we need? And I was like, what about Everclear?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
And he's like, not the stuff they sell in Minnesota. He's like, plus it's also Sunday, so you can't buy it in Minnesota yet at that point, right?
Funny.
And he's like, but yeah, the stronger stuff you could. So I called all the liquor stores in border towns in Wisconsin, and there was one that had more than one bottle. So I show up, and I was like, yeah, I'm here for the Everclear. They're like, well, how much do you want? I said, no, I'm here for the Everclear, like all of it. And I bought 5 cases of handles.
Yeah.
And then a couple more cases of just the, liter bottles.
Wow.
They didn't card me, and they helped me carry it to my car.
Good old Wisconsin.
Honestly, I know. Good old Wisconsin.
It reminds me of the legislature last year when they were trying to make the point that like you could have 1,000 joints, and then Representative Stevenson was like, well, I can buy enough grain belt for my basement. And it's like, well, Colin bought enough Everclear to kill Cottage Grove.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's amazing. I drove very carefully on the way to Cottage Grove.
It's incredible. So one question that I have, and you might not have been part of these conversations, but I think one thing that people have asked about for a while is looking at some of the early genetics that were brought into Minnesota. What was some of the decision making around like what cultivars to use? Obviously, from the consumer side, you didn't see like Blue Dream. You saw black or orange or whatever be it. Yeah. But what sort of was the conversation around like essentially what is good to grow from that medical standpoint?
And a lot of that, I really think came down to the initial cultivation, consultants and partners that we had, because a lot of them were responsible for kind of picking that initial genetic library.
Very cool.
Also, I mean, we knew that we couldn't, unfortunately we couldn't disclose, right? What it was.
Absolutely.
By law, which really sucked.
Yeah.
However.
No marketing.
Yeah. No marketing. None at all. However, we knew as an extract only market, right? You want something that is, that tests pretty well and yields really high, like per square foot or per plant, right? And probably something that is pretty tasty,
Fair.
right? In the sense that like we could capture, like if you could capture terpenes on an initial extraction run and then add them back into the finished product, like you could at least get that whole plant entourage, kind of, essence that people miss when you can't, smoke, let's say, or something like that. Yeah, so that was probably it. I think, the CBD dominant strain that we initially selected was selected specifically for the ratio.
Cool.
So we done some work with some pharmacists and understood that 20-to-1 is an ideal ratio for extreme severe seizure disorders, and so we found a hybrid strain that grew at 20-to-1.
Okay.
So if we could grow to spec, actually, it was a lot easier on the scientists in the back end.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
I can imagine. So looking for a lesson in it, essentially relying on expertise to figure out what is going to be able to work in this market, not only from like a functional standpoint, but also just like what's going to make good product.
Yeah. And then, the lesson also became, depending on the products that you're producing, you may not need a large or broad selection. Like it actually, that variability actually would hurt the companies in the early days of the Minnesota market. You were punished for having a broad strain selection. So, Leafline had a couple of, high THC strains, and like they had a 1-to-1 strain, and they had a high CBD strain, and that was like those are the production strains, and they had 20 others, in the waiting, but like, we're
if
kind
it's
of,
working,
it's working, and like we'd have to make basically a whole new product.
So the desanctification of
Yeah.
bringing more products on
Yeah.
kept you from.
from bringing in those other strains, and some of them are really really great and like really whatever, really tasty, or like had different or interesting terpene profiles, let's say, that were like, oh, this would be great for X.
And so your lineup on July 1st, you've covered vape cartridges.
Yep.
What else was available?
We had some tinctures. I know we were developing a sublingual spray. That,
Yeah. I like sprays.
They're nice. Because it's a fast acting.
Mm-hmm.
If you put them under the tongue, and ours, we had like one that was an orange, and it tasted kind of like a dreamsicle.
Sure.
And that was it was really nice, because so many of them are like mint, which is great. I like mint, but mint is not for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so something that's a little sweeter, quote unquote sweeter, is nice. So we had those products. The dispensary was really tricky. Our Egan one was the one that opened first. And we had paint was drying on the wall that day. I mean, and then the vault, the poor gentleman that we hired to like deliver the vault in so we could get approved by the state to operate, he had a health issue and ended up in the hospital. And so like we had to we thought our vault was lost, and like we had to go like contact someone else to get the keys for his business, to like get someone else to like go into his business and deliver the vaults. And then and they were like really, and then like they get there and they're like, oh yeah, these are going to break the floor tiles if we set them down, so what do you do? And then someone went out and got hockey pucks, because it's Minnesota, and like you set the vault on these hockey pucks. And
That's so Minnesotan. I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Just got some pucks in Egan,
No
Yeah.
big deal. Pucks supporting all the cannabis product. And
But take us through even why you need a vault. So what was the requirement there?
So it was, I think in modern current day dispensaries in most markets, right, it's you just need a secure area to store it. And eventually, even in Minnesota, we got to, we could have, as long as the room was secure.
Okay.
You could, and you had access controls, and there was like, you couldn't like break through the wall or something. There was like reinforced whatever everywhere else. You could lock it up there, but initially it had to be in like a safe. Like think like a gun safe or a money safe or an old Western safe.
Yeah.
Which sounds really cool, and I liked it because it was kind of like a movie. Except you can't put much stuff in there.
No.
Because this isn't like a huge like old bank style like full room safe. This is just like a safe. Like you lock it in.
Yeah. So we could build a room that you probably could not drive a car through, but we still had to put this like old Western safe, like you're spinning dials and like doing whatever, on it, and it held like barely enough medicine for the week, so you're like making all these deliveries all the time, and then God forbid you run out of a product, and then at the time you needed, it might still be the case too, you need at least 2 people to like deliver, right? 2 people, and then the manifests, and then I mean, I don't know, you probably needed spotter planes with like snipers and stuff at that point. I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, around that same time, Clem was doing his research, and when they went out looking for feral hemp, they had to have a gun safe in the back of their pickup truck. So it's like, it's
God forbid they crash and then like hemp gets out or something.
Well,
yeah,
that would be tragic. Yeah. I mean, there'd be dead animals and babies everywhere.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's not growing wild throughout all of Minnesota or
not
anything.
Not at all.
for years and years and years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's like Fort Snelling days. No big deal.
So we've talked a lot about sort of like the first couple of days. Yeah, for real.
They gave it out to the settlers at Fort Snelling.
On it, well, and like, so I tell this story because I think it's one of the coolest ones ever. And if you go back to like some of the original writings about Fort Snelling, there's literally the records of like the wives of these soldiers tossing bird seed out over the hill, and that was hemp seed that then took root. And like some of the earliest hemp that we had growing in our state was prior to statehood, and it's really been here longer than Minnesota has. But
Right.
yeah. I love it. So tell us a little bit more about like, so you've been operating, maybe you get like a year or 2 into business. Obviously, like it's no hidden secret that financially that was a tough business to operate. What was it like sort of being the CFO, COO at that time when, I mean, you have so many regulations and chains on your business really sort of preventing like huge success.
When I started cannabis, I had hair. Right?
Okay.
I don't have hair. I don't have hair now. So if you're
There we go.
listening
That
to
says
this,
it.
if you're on YouTube, you get it. But if you're listening to this, I'm,
We're doomed.
it was rough. It was really, really stressful. I mean, there were a couple times I'd pass out at home or something, and my wife would have to drag me up off the floor and ask if I'm okay. So it was really, really stressful. And you layer on all these different whether it's security and regulatory requirements and fees for this and licensing fees for this and that, and annual regulatory licensing fees.
I'm sure the tax structure is unlike other
the tax
startups.
structure, the 280E tax structure really sucks. Even it just does. And then you have the great thing that there are pharmacists, and this is a great thing, right? Because they're actually like the person you would want dosing anything, right? Like pharmacists are amazing, intelligent folks, and they study the endocannabinoid system, and they're really expensive. And so if you need, and that like line item is, there was probably a year where we spent more on pharmacists than we made in revenue, right? But we had to have them just to be open.
Because for people who maybe haven't been in Minnesota's medical program, let's say your doctor says, you're approved. You get approved by the state. Before you can ever pick up your product, you're meeting with a pharmacist at the dispensary to talk through the different options, to figure out what works best for you. Maybe a couple weeks down the line, you figure, I want to try something different. You're going back to that pharmacist to talk to them again. And
And are they in store when you're there?
at least in the past, they have been. Recently, they've switched to where you can call in and have like an online or on-call appointment.
That was a COVID era kind of. They allowed for the remote consultation, but previous to that, it was by law. The pharmacist had to be there meeting with you in person, and they had to push the button, essentially, quote unquote, push the button on every transaction that like ping back to the state's registry. So they're there having to like approve everything, and so you really can't make a sale without them. You legally can't be open without them. Patients legally can't make a purchase or get their medicine without them. So they're a great benefit, and they were also a massive cost, especially when the adoption of medical cannabis in Minnesota was and actually still is very low. It's very, very slow. One, it was an extract only market, which typically is like 1.1% of population, let's say, but that's still like we're not even there yet in Minnesota with flower, right? To 1.1% of population, which is wild. Right?
Yeah.
Like, because it should be, it should have been 50.
Yeah, if we
60,
want patients to be using this,
people,
that's not close.
And we ran into a problem early on. No one knew who could certify them, and the state actually forbid anyone to tell anyone who. So we had a list. We personally, Leafline had a list of we knew physicians that would certify. We were not allowed to publish or disclose it. So we had to set up a call center, and people could call us, and we could maybe tell them over the phone and direct them to people. But there was no directory of here are physicians. So, and we have a lot of big healthcare groups in Minnesota, even,
I mean, a standout
Fairview
amount
and, and like all these big,
right.
Yeah. So you go to, wherever you're at Southdale, and you ask them, and they're like, no, nobody in this whole health system does. Good luck.
For sure.
And so you're kind of like, you hit a brick wall. So patient enrollment's really low. I hired and built a whole team of people that went out like drug reps to doctors' offices and got them to enroll as certifying physicians. And then we started to go work with typically patient advocacy groups. So go with Epilepsy Foundation and the American Cancer Society and autism groups and things like that.
Wow. That's part of your marketing strategy in a sense.
It became the marketing strategy and really the only one available to us. Yeah.
And I mean, even last year I heard people saying, I can't find a good doctor to go to, or I only have to go. I'm in this network. I can't find a doctor.
For sure. I have a very clear memory of having a good friend of mine dealing with intractable pain at the time and going to TRIA and having a wonderful doctor. So not at all a knock on the doctor, but the doctor, saying, we've tried a lot of different things. Maybe you can try like hypnosis or things that are more of like on the mental side. And she's like, well, I'd really like to try cannabis. Like, sorry, we don't prescribe that here. Yeah. And just like thinking about being in this appointment where the doctor is saying, cannabis, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't have medical value right now. But hypnosis, that might. And not knocking either of those, not knocking the doctor, but just thinking about, wow, like being at a time where cannabis was that neglected. And
it's amazing. And it was really expensive for patients. It still is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the annual certification or registration fee is still, I think, exorbitant.
So thankfully here in Minnesota, they've gotten rid of that. But that was, like 2 months, like very, very recently.
Within months.
Yeah.
Right?
Going back, so the same friend back in 2015 was looking at spending about $250 to get a doctor to say, yeah, we'll approve you. And then another, I think like $200 with the state. Yeah. Insane. So you're already spending, $500 before you even walk into the dispensary. And then you're looking at, all right, maybe I want to try this vape product and it's $100.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had half-gram vapes at like $70, let's say, or $75. And quite frankly, at first, I think, benchmarked at a price per cannabinoid. So if you looked at it, it was on par with some other markets on a per milligram of THC level, but it also was still really expensive. And then even as those markets, like they saw price compression, thankfully, which is great, right? And so they went from like 20 cents per milligram of THC down to, 10 or 9 or 7 or whatever, right? Like Minnesota didn't really budge, and didn't really have room to. Yeah, right? They're kind of like, this is where we're at, and we're, each company's losing, like, it was well documented. There are all these articles. Right?
For sure, yeah.
$2 million a year, $3 million a year. And
God, who's that CFO?
I know,
well,
right?
Well, and I think like the biggest thing that we saw in those other states is sort of that continual ramp up of more patients being enrolled, this expansion of the program. And at least for those first few years in Minnesota, there was like that initial peak and then nothing.
Flat.
We saw maybe a new condition get approved and then you'd see like a minor peak. Yep. But until intractable pain was added, I mean, you never saw any expansion of that. Yeah. And I imagine from the scaling of a business side, you're already having to supply all these products. You're already having to make sure that you have this. And now your consumer base is not growing at all.
Yeah. And you're in it. I mean, you spent cash for your building, so you're land, building, all the grow lights, right? Like tables, HVAC. And then, if you think about like electricity for a, if you have a home grow, it's a home grow, right? Or like if you're growing in your garage, like it's tough. But you notice the bump in your bill, right? Even with LED, But this was early on, so this was like HPS, like high pressure sodium.
Okay,
so big electricity draw. I mean, you're talking 15-20 grand a month,
and you can't write that off.
You can't write it off. You've got 15-20 grand in testing a month. You've got this and this and this and this and this, and then you have. In order to formulate products and actually get it within these variances, I mean, you need some PhDs kicking around, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they're not cheap, and and a lot of them are really lovely people, and we'd like them to stick around. So we're like, okay, we got to find benefits for these folks, and and treat them like the amazing human beings they are.
Yeah. Thinking about the entire infrastructure before even a patient walks in the door that first day, like. Right. Insane to think about. It's
pretty amazing, right? Yeah. So those kind of cost structures, the regulatory cost structures, you have to have all these different cameras, right? So like, even to this day, if I'm building a new dispensary somewhere in the country, like I have to budget $150,000 for like cameras and access control.
Yeah. At the CannConnect panel, I think. You brought up AWS server costs.
Yeah. So they, every state will tell you how long you have to archive the security footage, right? And so usually it's such a high resolution because they want you to be able to like zoom in. They want it to be color. They want, blah, blah, blah. I get it. And come on now. But I digress. And then, it says, but if it's 60 or 90 days or more, right? Like that, those are like terabytes upon terabytes of data, because video takes up a ton of room, and there's usually audio with it too, and in some states you have to. So it's like video with a full audio, blah blah blah. Like, you know, like your server costs are insane.
Yeah. I had a good friend of mine that was working at a medical dispensary out of Oregon when they switched over to adult use. And their business was looking at like, well, is this like a step that we want to take transitioning over? Yeah. And at the time, medical dispensaries didn't have to have the constant surveillance, but adult use did. Ooh. And so this retail store was looking at spending, I think it was like $80,000 at the time, just for their retail store, to make sure that you have the infrastructure in place for regulators to look and say, yeah, you're following the law.
Yeah.
It's insane to think about.
No one has stole that vial of product that has never killed a human being in like thousands of years of documented use. You know, yeah.
Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that.
Because it is such an uphill battle. The stories you tell, it's such an uphill battle. I mean, in the back of my mind, I'm like, what are we even doing? Like, this is going to be really hard.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I think traditional market has seen that, right? I mean, those folks have fought for decades on decades through prohibition and everything else. And like, they did the battle, right? And and there's still battles happening, you know? And so the good news is now it's like, hey, guess what? Traditional market folks, like, you know, you have legacy market folks, you have backups here, you know?
Yeah.
And so if other people, and we see this a lot, I think in society in general, like different people have different like platforms, and they have different levels of you know, like privilege and agency and whatnot. And so like, if someone in our like really broad cannabis community has like privilege and a platform and a voice,
For
like
sure.
let's frickin' like use it. Let's all like get behind it. Like, instead of like, we could either shoot them down so then they never get that message out there, you know, or we could say, yeah, like I might not necessarily actually even agree with you on a lot of things, but there are some things we do. And
we've talked before about how like for a long time there was sort of like the weight that was medical, and then there was sort of the rest of us as the industry down here, be it hemp, be it legacy, whatever, be it. And I think moving into this next chapter of legalization, people are so much more aware of the idea that it's not like that was never the structure of how, like, that was set up artificially by law. We're all these pillars of the industry. There's medical, there's adult use, there's low potency, there's all of it. And I think the sooner that we as an industry recognize that and say like, hey, you can say that we've got these two behemoths and fight against them, or you can say, this is our industry. How can we grow this together and really help to expand cannabis access?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it really wasn't, that was definitely something that kind of stuck with me a lot through the whole process, was like, okay, it felt like everyone hated us. Mm-hmm. And like, I didn't pick there to be two licenses.
Totally.
You know, like, you can make arguments for limited licensing, but like, I'm talking limited licensing as in like, oh, maybe we need 10 medical licenses, you know, from the start, and like 200 dispensaries. You look at like Missouri. Mm-hmm. Missouri I think they over-licensed cultivation square footage for medical. So they gave out like 60 licenses at 30,000 square feet per license for a state of like 4 or 5 something million people.
Okay,
right?
gotcha.
So it's like, it's a little too much canopy for that many people licensed, right? And so a lot of licenses had to learn the hard way that some of them had to like shut down rooms and like, you know, scale back their cultivation, because like they're like, like the wholesale price in Missouri went from like in a year went from $3,200 to $1,200. Yeah. So like some of these companies are like, wait, my business model works at like $1,800, not $1,200. I'm like getting crushed. Yep. However, like Missouri put out 200 dispensaries, and they gave you bonus points if you were like the only one in your congressional district or like whatever. So you could be out, right? Mm-hmm. And so there are tons of access points, for cannabis in Missouri. They didn't tax it, for medical, right? There was like a state sales tax or something that went to like a fund that then they gave to charities. I was like, okay, this is nice. This is nice. That state with 5 million people had 300,000 medical patients.
5 million, 300,000.
Yeah, that's twice. So Michigan is twice the size of Missouri, and when they went rec, they had 300,000 medical patients. So they had twice the adoption. It was like it had a adoption rate closer to Oklahoma.
Wow, that's crazy to think about.
Yeah,
like, and I've heard it described as like this is the conservative libertarian approach to legalization. Is if you guys figure it out, but it's interesting seeing that adoption rate being so drastically different between two markets that otherwise relatively similar.
Yeah, relatively similar. Even similar in that there are a couple cities that make up a large portion of the population centers, right? And then, the rest of the population is pretty distributed, right? It's not barren, but it's distributed.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about, you could describe it, I guess, as the tail end of your interaction with Leafline. But first I want to talk a little bit about that transition from CFO, COO to the board member. What was it like to go from I work for this business to now essentially on paper I'm helping to run it? This is sort of...
Yeah. And, I think fortunately the transition was relatively easy. I've had the fortune to be, kind of the honor and and sometimes the burden of being on a number of different cannabis boards.
Okay.
Now, it's
after that experience.
Yeah, after that experience. Yeah, fortunately. Something, but the company had grown to a certain point, but instead of adding more executive staff, right? So we actually had a board that took a pretty active role. So I kept an office there and was there every day.
Okay.
Totally. And there were other board members that were there almost every day, having more day-to-day kind of roles. And we had really great folks that had come up through the company and kind of like grown with the company. And we knew that, the market was expanding. We were okay, like flower is on the horizon. We might actually get it passed, or, there were things that were like, okay, there's still things to do that can really like help this program. Right.
Clear runway for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was nice to be in a position where I could be up at like 30,000 feet and look at like the whole industry and also the whole industry and like look at the rest of the country and see like what's going on there, what might happen here, right? And then also dive into like the details of, all the different transactions at like the St. Cloud dispensary and like, okay, how many items were in each basket and like what items were purchased together versus alone. And, what is that? Like, so you can go zoom in, zoom out. It's really great. I think as a CFO for Leafline, I already had kind of like a legal fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders, which, is something that is, it adds like a weight in that, like, quite frankly, like if you do something that is deemed negligent, like all the investors get to sue you.
Gotcha. So it's not just like you get the bad performance review.
It's not like you get fired, like you get sued.
Okay.
So that was, and then the same thing as a board member. When you're a board member, again, like if you practice poor business judgment or, and or are negligent, like the investors can sue you. Yeah. So we had always been focused on the patients, and I really appreciated that, right? Like, okay, if we do right by them, the business thing will work out, and we'll get more people in the program, the pile will get bigger.
For sure.
Whatever. Right. And now I also had this and we have a bunch of people that put a bunch of money in. The program didn't grow as fast as you wanted it to. And somehow they have to get their money back or they're going to be so pissed that they're going to sue me.
I mean, that sounds like fun.
It's great. It's great.
I'm just thinking like this is a movie, like this has all the makings of like happy on the front side, scary on the back side, figure out how to play the balance in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, really tricky. And then, private companies are tricky too, right? So it's not like if you had, we had a lot of investors that were Minnesotans, and they might have been like, they were business leaders and, whatever, doctors and like, I don't know, real estate agents. They were just like,
upper class,
people.
but not exorbitantly rich.
They weren't, on any Forbes lists or anything like that, right? Sure. They weren't,
Jay-Z missed out on the leaf line.
He totally screwed that up. Yeah.
So how did you, it's interesting. So how long were you on the board before you started? And let's just get into it. How did those dealings with GTI evolve?
Okay. Yeah. So I'll go into as much detail as I can.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. Knowing that, there's some I can't.
You might get sued.
Because I might get sued, even now. I think we got to a certain point in the company's growth and even the cannabis industry, right? Where, there are big splashy deals, but then also you're seeing some companies grow through acquisitions. So if you look at, like, as an example, by 2020, like Verano had made, whatever,
For sure.
17 or 20 transactions, and had gone from like a very small MSO to like the third largest or fourth largest MSO in the country. And you could even argue that some of the transactions that they made, they were probably like, oh, that's a really good deal. Like, that's a nice, it's a nice market. Like, and I mean, I don't know how, I don't know how
stocks back in the day.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so, plus you have all these investors that might sue you at any moment. Right. So I think there's this whole point where it's like, okay, people are finding value in cannabis, right? And other cannabis companies are finding value in other smaller cannabis companies. Like, they want to, there are only 2 licenses in Minnesota. They might want to be here,
Yeah.
And, quite frankly, so I could like try to pay my investors back so they don't sue me, or by, sending them a dividend check, every quarter for the next, 3 decades. Right. But then who knows how long that takes and how long, what happens to the market, or if there's an apocalyptic event or, whatever.
Absolutely,
right. Yeah. Or it, gets legalized, and then like, what does that happen? Like, who the heck knows? It's just too many unknowns. And so, probably the best bet for like investors getting paid back is some type of a transaction. Probably a good bet.
A lot of businesses don't get sold in general, right?
A lot of them don't.
But if you have the ability to, it's probably the best way to get your money back.
And if that's your goal, right? Like, and we could talk about this in a few minutes about kind of my post Leafline work, right? Because they're like, different people are involved in cannabis businesses for different reasons, and some of them are like, this is my family business, and I'm gonna, and like, but it's also might be just like 5 of them that put in money, and they're like, we're all going to run this and it's going to be our thing, and then we're going to give it to our kids or something. Right. And some people are like, you know what? Like, I get to do some good and I get to make some money. So win-win, right? It's better than like, buying Amazon stock. Right.
Yeah.
It's
For sure.
More interesting, and like, it makes them feel a little better at night,
Because at the end of the day, you're providing medicine to people that need it. That's like
actually,
a pretty cool business to be part of. Yeah.
It's a good thing. So, so I think, I can't say a lot about the details of that whole process. Like, I knew a lot of, other folks in the cannabis industry that could potentially acquire Leafline, and I'm.
What were your stores called at the time?
They were called Leafline Labs.
Leafline.
Yeah, they were called Leafline. I think they were Leafline Labs, and then we were dropping the labs to just be Leafline.
Okay.
And then I think, post acquisition, GTI's renamed them Rise. Right. That's their one of their big retail brands. So, without I don't want to get into any of the details of the transaction, but what I will say, like, some takeaways for me from that whole process, and then other subsequent transactions that I've been a part of. A transaction, especially a larger transaction, but really most transactions, even if it's like $10 million, or one dispensary for, $5 million or something, or just like a license for, $200,000, right? Like, they can take time. So a big transaction where you have, you know, maybe a full vertical or something like that in a state, like that could take a year. That could take longer, right? Because there's all this, you know, paperwork and all lawyers have to make their money, right? And they get paid by the hour. So, you know, it takes a while. So
Are they cheap?
it's the cheap.
Just like pharmacists, right?
No big deal. No big deal. No big deal. Yeah. So the lawyers have to make their money. You know, there's a lot of back and forth. You know, the particulars of the deals and whatever. And like, do you get paid in cash or stock, or do you get paid in a combination of cash and stock? And like, you know, if you get paid in stock, like when can you sell the stock? Do you have to hold on to it for 6 months? Do you have to hold on to it for a year? Do you hold back like oftentimes deals will have an escrow kind of like holdback. So 10% of it will be held back in case like any shenanigans happen. And then, you know, the parties can, you know, pull from that pool to cover the said shenanigans. Usually it doesn't happen, but it just is like a good safety net. Right. So that's very common.
Sure.
And that can be, you know, I think standard in the cannabis industry is like 10 to 15% of the deal for, you know, somewhere between 12 to 18 months.
Shenanigan fund.
Yeah. They really should call it shenanigan fund because that is much more telling. Yeah. It's fun to say.
I don't know. I would imagine the numbers weren't public as it's a private company.
Right.
But given the a number of deals that you've been a part of since then, where does this deal rank as far as large, small as deals you've been a part of?
Yeah. It was a good deal. It was a good deal. I mean, it's you know, it's a full vertical. So, you know, you have your cultivation, you have your manufacturing, and you had we were in the process. We had just gotten approved for 8 dispensaries. So we were, you know, we had opened Wilmer, and we were looking at like Mankato and you know, some other spots. So it was, you know, as a growing market, you still had, you know, you knew that whomever acquired said company, right, could then, you know, potentially you had flower, which is probably going to increase sales, and you had adult use on the horizon, maybe someday that would increase sales potentially if you're able to participate.
Did you take any time off afterwards? Like, were you able to relax a little bit before you got into the next thing?
Well, I was already working at Merida. So I was already a partner at Merida when I was a board member at Leafline.
Okay.
And so...
so you caught the eye of the cannabis industry. You'd done a good enough job, and because Merida is the largest private equity cannabis-based fund in North America, or the world potentially.
I guess so, or one of the largest. Yeah, so it's, I mean, we're 4, 5 funds. We've probably deployed like $380, $400 million, and you know, have like 90 something portfolio companies that range from, you know, like grow generation and growing supplies to like New Frontier Data to, you know, actual licenses in different markets and like everything in between. And
I was having coffee with you a couple months ago, and I was like, "So, what's your bandwidth this spring?" And you're like taking me through all the licenses that you're either a part of or that you're overseeing, and it's like you're in 7 different states throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Like your life is a little crazy.
It's nuts. It is pretty nuts. But it's to me, it's really exciting. You know, because I get to see, you know, having been part of Minnesota, you know, kind of kicking off. And I get to see that in a number of different markets. So I get to go early before licenses are even out sometimes and meet a lot of great people. And then also, you know, help build companies. And that's the thing with Merida. They've, you know, it was, you know, founded, 6 years ago or so. And so, you know, I got connected to them pretty early on, actually. I've known some of the principals, like, before Merida was a thing, right? Just from the industry. And so when I moved to that board role at Leafline, I was fortunate enough, you know, to say, okay, now I can also go do some stuff at Merida, not have this, you know, kind of perceived conflict, right?
Absolutely, that makes sense.
You know, and especially if it's out of the state, you know, so then I could do things in other markets and you know, it's, part of the transaction with Dharma Pharmaceuticals, which was one of the 5 licensees, vertical licensees in Virginia. And that was actually also sold to GTI also in 2001.
21.
21. Yeah, sorry, 21. So, yeah, 2021.
An early operator in
Yeah,
this thing. Yeah,
super
yeah.
early. Yeah.
21.
It's like Dukes of Hazzard style. No, 21. So yeah, it's you kind of get to go see a lot of different markets, and that's what we've seen some of these transactions that they take a lot of time, and there's also kind of there's the need to pair the like company with an acquirer that like there's certain things that have to match, and like it's nice if the culture can be the same, but that's not always possible, right?
Sure, yeah.
However, like certainly, let's say if you're a cultivator, you probably want to find somebody else that grows similarly to you. So let's say if you're a cultivator, but you have, your greenhouse, you're a greenhouse cultivator or a sun-grown, right? Like, GTI is not going to buy you. Or like,
Gotcha. Totally.
probably,
That makes
probably
sense.
not.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know exactly, but I'm pretty sure that GTI and like Cresco, I don't think they have outdoor grows in their portfolio.
And is that from the
Yeah.
background? Would you have to guess from? We've been in the business long enough to know that sort of this is the
This is their
preferred way of
style,
growing.
or this
Okay.
is, yeah, you kind of get that sense from them. Or like, there's some MSOs or some acquirers that, they want, they like to kind of like build a brand portfolio, and there are some that want to do it all in house. So if you have a strong brand portfolio in your company, and like, don't sell it to, because if you go to somebody who likes to build in house, they're going to value your brands at like 0.
Okay.
So you get no extra dollars for like something that you might have built that's really special, right? Versus somebody that likes to build a brand portfolio of great consumer brands, they're like, oh my gosh, this is great. Like I will pay a premium for this company because they have this really cool brand.
Is it fun to be in the industry at a time when there's really not like a set rule book of here's exactly how you have to run a business?
It's the best.
Okay.
It's the best. Yeah. 'Cause it's to me, it's creative problem solving. It's I think I said this at the Canna Connect panel that I did. Like, I believe in cannabis. A wrong decision is better than a no decision. And that requires a very short feedback loop. So I had like a big whiteboard in my office, and it was like every Monday we would make a whole decision set of like, here's what we're going to do this week, and here's how we're going to measure everything that we're doing this week. And the next Monday we would come back and we'd look at the measures, and we're like, okay, that was great. Let's do those things. That was great. Do it again. And we had a whole list of like, don't do that again, stupid.
Okay.
And like we wrote it down. And like, to me, like if you do that, if you make the same mistake several times, like that's unforgivable. But like if you're not making any mistakes, that's also unforgivable.
Okay. Well, and you said that you brought this book in for us to take a look at here in the studio, right? Like the rules, the things that.
Oh, the
no,
rules,
I'm
the
just-
playbook. Right? The playbook, yeah.
But I mean, on that note, and I know we're a little short on time, but like knowing what you know about us, do you have any advice for what we're doing as far as like early on and media and not really being plant touching yet, but maybe aspirationally? Do you have any advice for us?
Wow, that's a good one. I think being self-aware and continuing to be self-aware, right? Like what do you want to get from this while you're in it? And like where it's going, do you want to stay with it? Do you not, right? Like what does that look like for you, each of you personally, right? I think that's really important, right? I think also understanding really, really sharply, like where's the value add of what you're doing, like now, right? So, Minnesota Cannabis College, amazing, right?
Appreciate it.
Yeah. I think the conversations that you have and the conversations that you host and hold space for, amazing, right? So there's lots of value in those.
Right.
And I'm a big believer that if you continue to do things that add value, right, like there's a reward that comes back for you.
Yeah.
And so I then what my advice, I guess, would be to continue to look for the reward, because it might look different each time, right? It might not look like, hey, here's a check, but it might look like an opportunity or, something. And it might just elevate your voice. It might bring you financial success. It might be, a partnership or whatever it is, or it might be an opportunity to develop a line of beverages, or like do plant touching things, and then you kind of create those parts of your business, and you use all the different parts of your business to amplify each other, right? In the same way that like we're all in the same industry, and we want to amplify each other. Like I want to support you and amplify you, and I appreciate your support, and it works.
Reciprocal relationships and always growing at the same time.
Yeah, and people underestimate, I think, the value of media and the breadth of media, like that it encompasses so much. But everybody has a story, right? And every collective of people have their own stories, and there's value in those, in telling them.
Well, we appreciate you being on the podcast and sharing your story, Colin. That's really nice.
For those looking to connect with you a little bit more, maybe they want to follow up or keep having this conversation, where would you recommend to send them?
Yeah, best place probably LinkedIn, cool. Colin Kelley.
Perfect. We'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah, perfect.
Ian, 2 E's and Kelley.
Yeah, 1 L in Colin, 2 E's in Kelley. Efficient and not efficient. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you again, Colin, for so much for coming on, sharing your past, sharing a little bit of your expertise, and appreciate looking forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks.
And we're back. Another episode of the Northern Lights podcast. This is Marcus Harkis with Clem and Dabney III, PhD. Another Cooking with Clem class. What are we cooking today, Doctor?
So today we're going to cook a vegetable stir fry or vegetable saute with our jerk seasoning. So it'll be jerk vegetables. So right now we threw some olive oil on the pan. We're just getting it to temperature right now. Once it heats up, we're going to throw in our vegetables. We're going to, get a little color on them. And then we're going to end up throwing in some garlic and ginger. And then once that kind of gets all put together, we're going to then add the jerk seasoning on top of them.
Wow, that sounds delightful.
So I think it looks like we got some heat going.
I'm in for a treat. I'm not even going to be able to eat dinner after this. This is my dinner, lunch and dinner.
So yeah, we've got, some bell peppers, a yellow and an orange. We got some mushrooms, some broccoli, and some carrots, so sliced up carrots. So we're going to get a little color on these guys.
That's what I was just thinking. I love the color combo. Yellow, orange, and green. And what's the mushroom color?
Our garlic and ginger. Maybe we'll add a little bit of salt right now.
I love ginger.
So yeah, thanks for tuning in, Cooking with Clem.
Cool. So, at what point do we add the jerk?
We'll add the jerk nearing to the end.
All right. What other things do you like to make with the jerk seasoning?
Of course, the classic jerk chicken.
Yeah.
I like to make like jerk nuts, like some jerk cashews.
Ooh.
Those are pretty fire.
I've never had that.
Of sweetness, either maple syrup or, honey or sugar. Kind of caramelize them and then throw the jerk on top of the caramelized sugar. That's fire.
I was just about to say, how do you get it to stick?
Yeah, jerk shrimp, jerk pork. It's pretty. The nice thing about jerk is it's super versatile.
Yeah. How long have you been a jerk enthusiast?
I'd probably say since before 19, but I went to Jamaica twice when I was 19 years old.
Wow.
And I probably fell in love with jerk then. Well, I don't know. It might have even been sooner because I went to the Bahamas and had some jerk, but I think I like Jamaican jerk better than Bohemian jerk.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from Jamaica, I think.
Yep. But yeah, so I've kind of been in love with it, I guess, most of my adult life.
Are there any restaurants I mean, you know, most Jamaicans wouldn't respect any of the the Americanized stuff that's going on in restaurants. But have you been to any places that had some good jerk recipes?
I used to live literally across the alleyway from a place called Marla's Caribbean Kitchen.
Oh,
It no longer exists. It's a food truck now. The brick and mortar doesn't exist. But
Yeah, I know
if you
Marla.
catch that Marla's food truck, she's got some pretty good jerk. Her chicken callaloo, that shit's fire.
Nice.
I guess Pimento's probably a good place for like if you wanted some fast jerk. Harry Sings isn't too bad.
Shout out to Nanny's Jamaican Kitchen over here in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yeah, we had some catered nannies at a retro bakery party.
Oh yeah,
And that was awesome.
yeah. Some people said that was the best chicken they've ever had. Some of the attendees. But I just heard a story yesterday about how on Easter he was giving away hundreds of meals, free, no questions.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was a righteous thing to do. And that's a good man, Chef Okoye
Last time I talked to Nanny's,
from Mobe.
he was interested in making some hemp clothing for his brand
Oh really?
a couple years ago.
Nannies? Nice. Yeah, that man works probably 23 hours a day.
He owns the building too. Shout out to him.
Yeah, that's a hard-working man. Great spirit, good family man. Dr. Dabbs is a great family man too.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. And that's a good thing for families to do is to break bread. So I'm so grateful. I feel fortunate that we get to break this bread.
Yeah, we're getting done. It's a pretty quick meal. Simple ingredients, healthy. Yeah, I'm excited to break this out when this gets done. It smells good. I love that. Love the smell of cooking ginger.
Man,
With all the
ginger is one of
aromatics.
the best things on the earth. I was just thinking the other day I need to learn how to make my own ginger beer because once you've had like real fresh Caribbean ginger beer, none of the shit in the stores is like really satisfying. It's like, God.
Yeah, ginger ale really doesn't make sense after you've had good ginger
No,
beer.
it's like, no, it's not even close. I mean, I can still enjoy it, but it's not even the same drink.
I think we're getting pretty close. We're going to start to add the seasoning now.
Nice.
So for someone who's maybe never had jerk seasoning, or maybe this is their first time ever hearing about that, like what is jerk seasoning?
So it's kind of a mixture of different herbs. So there's like clove, cardamom, allspice. I'm not too far away. There's a little bit of pepper in there. There's Scotch bonnet peppers.
Ooh, I love Scotch bonnet pepper.
And a couple other things.
But it derives from Jamaica. It's a seasoning style. It's taken the U.S. by storm, and shit seems like the past 20 years. You often see places do strange things with jerk in America. Because it's so versatile.
Can we get a couple plates, please?
But yeah, meats and vegetables. Yeah. That's the thing about food. Like when it's well seasoned, it just elevates the experience. Wow. Fast. You could do this at home. Try this at home.
Let's go. Make sure they get some broccoli.
Are there some forks? Wow, it looks beautiful. Dr. Dabbs is also a chef at home.
Chef Dabbs.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Here's, I should share this plate. Okay. Thank you. Wow. This is how you elevate your edible lifestyle. Cooking with Clem. You don't just have to eat gummies and chocolate bars and drink carbonated beverages. You can eat real food with cannabis. Shout out to Doc Dab's Healthy Highs. I'm going to have a very healthy high tonight. I'm already high as hell.
Thanks, Marcus. But yeah, I think that's one cool thing about the versatility of our seasoning line is like it's kind of whatever your favorite foods are, what you can come up with. Most of the seasonings we use are pretty versatile. Like we like for the barbecue, I like making barbecue popcorn or barbecue seasoned fries.
Barbecue popcorn?
Yeah. Use the barbecue seasoning as seasoning for the popcorn. Get them nice and buttery. Get it on there. Shake them up. Fire.
That sounds phenomenal, actually.
But yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head when you were like, it doesn't have to be gummies or sodas or seltzers or sweet things. I think that there's a huge wide open marketplace for savory products and savory edibles and edibles that you can kind of like fit in your life way. It's like these products, the seasoning products are just like, what kind of flavors do you like and what do you like to cook? And you can incorporate it into your lifestyle.
Man, thanks for producing these episodes with us. You're helping to educate the Minnesota cannabis community about alternatives to the status quo.
This is a great opportunity here at the Dabbler Depot and, with the Minnesota Cannabis College and the Northern Lights podcast. So, yeah, thanks again for having me.
Should we check in with our friends at the Dabbler Depot, see if they want to try some?
That'd be awesome.
I think they would love it. I mean, it just keeps getting better and better. I feel, whoa. You know what I mean? That's some Americanized shit when they, like, make it unbearably hot.
Sure.
It's like, okay. But this is great.
Oh, that's really good. So that's your jerk seasoning?
The jerk seasoning, yeah. Yeah, so it's jerk, yellow and orange bell pepper, some broccoli, carrots, onions, or not onions, garlic and ginger, and some mushrooms.
Yep, so we got the vegan people excited.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, no, it's super good. When did you come up with the jerk seasoning? Was that one of the first ones?
The jerk was one of the first ones. It was actually the first one. Okay. So we dived into, I guess maple sugar was before jerk, but I think sugar is more of a sugar and this is more seasoning wide. But yeah, jerk was our first seasoning, and then it took off, and we were like, we got to figure out what other things we can make that are popular seasonings to add to the lineup. So yeah, we've got the jerk, barbecue, Southwest chili, which is a great one for like tacos or seasoned sour cream. We've got the barbecue and a Nashville hot chicken.
Oh yeah, shout out to Kamal.
Shout out Kamal. We've got a couple in the pipeline. We're thinking about doing like a knockoff Old Bay style kind of like a fish one. So that's kind of a hole in our seasoning game is we don't have anything for fish. And
are you guys in the lab buying all the inputs and making them original jerk seasonings?
Yep.
Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, that's how I would anticipate you doing it, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Whip it in the kitchen.
Whip it.
Thank you.
There's something out there for the vegans and the vegetarians.
Yeah, so I think this series we tried to showcase, a mix of dishes, something for breakfast, something for dessert, and then things you could use for lunch and dinner time, as well as, the, like Marcus said, vegan options. I guess you could say pescatarian with the Cajun shrimp.
Yeah.
So to show off, that it doesn't have to be strictly just jerk chicken.
Yeah.
You can use it to cook just about anything.
Right.
And spice, add some seasoning to your life.
So let us know in the comments how you would or do make food with jerk seasoning. And make it with the THC. I mean, elevate your food game.
Yeah, again, each one of these packets, it's a 5 milligram packet. So there's 5 grams of seasoning, 5 milligrams per serving. 10 of these come in each bag. You just tear them right open and add it to your favorite foods. So thanks again for this segment of Cooking with Clem.
Thank you very
the Northern
much.
Lights podcast.
Peace and blessings.
And that's all we got for today. Shout out to Colin. Thanks so much for coming on, sharing a little bit more about your story. Story?
Shout out to Liam and the guys at Dabbler Depot for getting us another sweet sample.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to Clem. Thanks so much for coming on, teaching us about some of your spices, showing us some recipes that we can make with them. That was a good episode.
Can't wait for next week.
Yeah.
What's going on next week?
Oh, such a great episode that we got coming up next week. Next week, Drew Emmer from Bovida will be coming on. Clem will be coming back on. We got some news. We got some cannabis products. It'll be a fun time.
We had another hearing for all of you who love legislative updates.
Yeah, you love hearing us talk about the Capitol. You know it. It's what you tune in for. All right, well, that's what we got for this week. Keep coming back. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of that stuff.
Call your legislators.
Call your lawmakers. Definitely do that. And we'll see you again in just about a week. Thanks all. See you later.
Northern Lights is a Minnesota Cannabis College production. This episode was produced by me, Tanner Barris, and by my co-hosts John Barty and Marcus Harkis. Production assistance from Shayna Payton and Steve Eigenman. Today's episode is presented by North Star Law Group, your trusted partner in Minnesota's burgeoning legal cannabis industry. The information provided in this podcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice, but is instead for general information purposes only. Information shared may not constitute the most up-to-date or legal information. No listener should act solely on the basis of information provided without first seeking their own legal counsel. The opinions and views expressed on this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of the Minnesota Cannabis College. Please listen responsibly.
Yeah, dude, he's not a good guy, but he has like that personality. He does a radio show. I think it's on Fox 9. It's a TV show. He has like a TV hour every week.
They'll just give anyone a camera these days.
Right? Okay, let's
Yeah,
get
seems
to
like
it.
a good point to
Off
go
the
in on.
football, yeah.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome.